Her fork froze midair as her daughter's words struck. You didn't contribute. On Christmas Eve, when family should feel like home, a mother was turned into a stranger at her own table. The wind outside howled against the frosted windows, rattling the glass as if it too wanted in from the cold. Inside her small apartment, Clara pulled her worn sweater tighter around her shoulders. The radiator hissed weakly, doing little to push away the December chill. She had spent most of the day alone, listening to carols on the radio and staring at the clock. Christmas Eve, once her favorite day of the year, now pressed on her chest like a weight. Her fingers trembled as she wrapped a scarf around her neck. She glanced at the small gift bag on her counter. Inside was a hand-knit blanket she had spent weeks making. The yarn was uneven, the edges a little crooked, but she had poured her heart into every stitch. It wasn't much, not compared to the shiny, expensive presents she imagined her daughter and son-in-law would be exchanging tonight. But it was something. It was love woven tight. Still doubt whispered. Would they even want it? Would she even want me there? Clara shook the thought away and forced herself out the door, clutching the bag. Snow crunched under her boots as she walked the few blocks toward her daughter's house, her breath fogging the air. Lights twinkled from porches, and laughter spilled out of neighbors' windows. She passed families gathered around glowing trees, shadows of togetherness painted on frosted glass. Each step forward felt heavier but also necessary. She was a mother, and Christmas Eve wasn't meant to be spent alone. Hey there, my dear family and friends. If you're already tuned in and ready to enjoy this story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because tomorrow I'll be bringing you another story just as captivating, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Across town, Lydia stood in her bustling kitchen, her sleeves rolled up, her cheeks flushed from the heat of the oven. She had been cooking since morning, determined to make this the perfect Christmas Eve dinner for her small family. The roast was almost ready, the vegetables were lined up, the pies cooling on the counter. The table was set with a red and gold cloth, candles flickering gently. Everything had to look flawless. But beneath her busy hands, Lydia's heart beat with a different rhythm, one of resentment. She remembered too many Christmases where she had felt like the only adult in the room, holding everything together while her mother drifted in and out of responsibilities. To Lydia, tonight wasn't just about food. It was about fairness, about everyone doing their part. Her husband poked his head into the kitchen. "Everything smells amazing," he said, kissing her cheek. "Are you sure you don't want me to set another place? For your mom?" Lydia's hands froze on the knife she was using to slice bread. She forced a smile. She said she might stop by. "I don't know if she'll actually come." "Still," he said softly, "it's Christmas." Lydia didn't reply. She busied herself with arranging the slices, her jaw tight. Christmas, she thought bitterly. Every year I carry it on my back. And when has she ever contributed? Clara paused outside the glowing house, her heart hammering. She could see Lydia moving inside, hear the muffled laughter of her grandchildren. The sight both warmed and stabbed her. She adjusted the scarf around her neck, smoothed down her hair, and whispered to herself, "It's Christmas, Clara. Just be brave." When the door opened after her knock, the smell of cinnamon and roasted meat hit her like a memory of better years. Her granddaughter squealed and hugged her tightly, and for a brief moment, Clara felt the warmth she had longed for. But then Lydia appeared in the doorway of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Their eyes met, mother and daughter, standing in the glow of holiday lights, with years of unspoken words between them. Clara offered a small smile, lifting the gift bag slightly, her voice gentle. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Lydia's lips pressed into a line, her nod stiff. "Come in, Mom." The warmth of the house wrapped around Clara, but it didn't reach her bones. Something in her daughter's tone made it clear. She was welcome but not truly wanted. And as she stepped into the dining room, Clara's heart sank. The table was perfectly set, with just enough chairs for everyone else. If you were Lydia, would you welcome your mother openly despite past disappointments, or hold her accountable for not contributing? Comment your thoughts below. The dining room glowed with soft candlelight, casting golden shadows across the walls. The table was a feast of effort, roasted meat steaming on its platter, bowls of vegetables glistening with butter, bread stacked high, and pies lined neatly at the far end. The clink of silverware and the chatter of children should have made it a perfect Christmas Eve. Clara lowered herself into a chair near the end of the table, the one Lydia motioned toward. It wasn't beside her daughter, but rather tucked at the corner, almost out of view. She tried to ignore the sting. Instead, she placed the small gift bag by her feet, smoothing her lap as though that would settle the unease inside her chest. Lydia moved like a conductor in front of an orchestra, directing the meal. James, could you pour the cider? Kids, napkins folded neatly, please. She wore efficiency like armor, her lips taut but determined. She didn't look at her mother. Clara glanced around the table. Laughter bubbled between her grandchildren as they jostled for bread. Her son-in-law leaned back with a smile, clearly proud of Lydia's work. Clara's stomach growled faintly, and she folded her hands to still it. Finally, Lydia placed the last dish on the table and announced, "All right, let's eat." Plates clattered as everyone helped themselves. Meat was carved, vegetables scooped, cider poured. The air filled with the scent of rosemary and garlic, the kind of aroma that usually meant family, celebration, belonging. When the serving bowls reached Clara, she reached out, smiling timidly. "I'll just take a little." Lydia's hand shot out, stopping her. Her voice was quiet but firm. "No, Mom." The table froze. Forks hovered in midair. Eyes darted between mother and daughter. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Clara blinked, her hand still suspended above the dish. I don't understand." Lydia inhaled sharply, then set the serving spoon back with deliberate precision. "You didn't contribute this year. You didn't help with groceries or cooking or anything. So tonight, I think it's only fair that those who contributed eat." The words fell like shards of glass. Clara's throat tightened, her chest burning as if someone had carved out the center of her being. The room blurred for a moment, her ears ringing. Fair. On Christmas Eve. In front of her grandchildren. Her granddaughter's fork clinked nervously against her plate, and James coughed, shifting uncomfortably. "Lydia," he started, but she silenced him with a sharp look. Clara swallowed hard. She tried to steady her voice, but it wavered. "Sweetheart, I didn't have money this year. But I brought something." She gestured weakly toward the gift bag by her feet. "I made you." "It's not the same," Lydia cut in, her words clipped. "I've carried this whole holiday by myself. Every year it's me. And you think knitting a blanket makes up for that?" The bag at Clara's feet suddenly looked pathetic, small, out of place among the glittering dishes and candlelight. She wanted to disappear. Her eyes burned, but she forced herself not to cry in front of everyone. Slowly, she pulled her hand back, folding it tightly into her lap. She nodded once, as though agreeing with a verdict. "I see." Her voice was barely more than a whisper, but in the silence that followed, it felt like a scream. Dinner resumed awkwardly. Forks scraped plates, children whispered. James tried to spark small talk. But Clara didn't taste anything. She sat with her empty plate before her, every bite taken around her echoing like a drumbeat of rejection. Her stomach twisted with hunger, but deeper still was the ache in her chest, an emptiness no food could fill. She thought of the nights she had skipped meals years ago so Lydia could eat. The times she had worked double shifts at the factory, fingers blistered, just to afford her daughter's winter coat. None of it seemed to matter now. None of it counted as contribution. When the laughter of the children finally broke through her thoughts, it felt cruel. She forced a smile at them, but inside something hardened. A seed planted in humiliation began to sprout. Revenge, she thought bitterly. Not the kind that destroys, but the kind that reminds, that teaches, that forces the heart to see what it's blinded itself to. For the first time that night, Clara didn't just feel like a guest at her daughter's table. She felt like a stranger. And strangers don't stay silent forever. Do you believe Lydia was right to measure her mother's worth by contribution? Or was this an unforgivable cruelty on Christmas Eve? Share your thoughts in the comments. The clatter of dishes filled the silence left by Lydia's words. Forks scraped against porcelain, glasses clinked, but no one spoke with ease anymore. The children whispered to each other, their laughter muted, as though even they sensed the frost that had settled across the table. Clara kept her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the candle flame flickering in front of her. It wavered with every draught, fragile but persistent. She envied it. Her stomach growled again, a quiet betrayal, but she pressed her lips tight, refusing to let it show. James, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "The roast is delicious, honey. You've really outdone yourself." Lydia's shoulders stiffened. She didn't look at her husband, just pushed a strand of hair behind her ear and kept cutting her meat. "Thank you." Clara caught the glance James gave her. Sympathetic, almost apologetic, but she turned away. She didn't want pity. Not tonight. The meal stretched on like an eternity. Every bite others took seemed louder than the last, echoing against the emptiness in front of Clara. She kept rehearsing words in her head. "I gave up so much for you, Lydia. Doesn't that count?" But the words stuck in her throat, heavy with years of silence. When the plates were finally cleared, Lydia busied herself in the kitchen, stacking dishes, rinsing pans. Clara rose quietly, intending to help, but Lydia turned sharply. "No, Mum. I've got it." The rejection was sharper than the first. Clara hesitated, her hand hovering over a dish towel, before she slowly set it down. Her daughter didn't even look at her. Instead, Clara retreated to the living room, sinking into the couch as the children played on the floor with new toys. Their laughter was light, unburdened, and for a moment it warmed her heart. But then Lydia entered, drying her hands, her voice brisk. "All right, kids, time for bed. Santa won't come if you're awake too late." They whined, but obeyed, hugging their grandmother quickly before scampering upstairs. Clara clung to their small arms, their soft hair brushing her cheek. They were her anchor, proof that love still lived here somewhere. When the room quieted, Clara glanced at Lydia, who was blowing out the candles at the table. "You didn't have to say it that way," she murmured. Lydia froze. Then she turned slowly, her jaw set. "Mom, I've been carrying this for years. Every holiday, every birthday, it's me. Cook, I clean, I plan, I buy. You just show up." Clara's chest ached. "I show up because I want to be with you. Isn't that enough?" "No, it's not enough." Lydia snapped, her voice sharp as glass. "Do you know how exhausting it is to do this alone? To feel like you're the only one keeping things together?" Clara flinched, her hands tightening on her knees. She wanted to shout back, to remind Lydia of every sacrifice she had made when her daughter was young. The long nights at the factory, the winters she went without a coat so Lydia could have one, the meals she skipped so Lydia would eat. But the words stayed locked inside. Pride and something darker held her tongue. Instead, she said quietly, "I thought love didn't need to be measured." Lydia's eyes glistened, but her voice was cold. "Love doesn't put food on the table." The words sliced through Clara, and for the first time that evening, tears welled in her eyes. She turned away quickly, unwilling to let her daughter see her break. The clock ticked on the mantel, each second pounding in the silence. Lydia gathered the dishes into the dishwasher with unnecessary force, each clatter a punctuation mark to her anger. Clara sat stiff on the couch, her fingers clutching the edge of her scarf as though it could keep her from unraveling completely. In her chest, two forces warred. One whispered, "Tell her. Show her the scars she's forgotten. Make her see what she owes you." The other whispered, "Stay silent. Revenge will speak louder than tears." And Lydia, standing at the sink, gripped the counter with white knuckles. Inside, her own war raged. Why did I say it in front of the kids? Why did I say it at all? Yet her pride stiffened her spine. She had waited years to speak that truth. To back down now felt like betrayal of herself. Neither woman spoke. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until the only sounds were the hum of the dishwasher and the faint whistle of the wind outside. It was a silence that said everything words could not. I'm hurt. I'm angry. And I don't know how to come back from this. When pride and pain collide in a family conflict, should one side break the silence first, or is it better to let the other reflect? What would you do in Clara or Lydia's place? The storm arrived just as Clara slipped her arms into her coat. She had hoped to leave quietly, to walk the snowy blocks back to her small apartment with nothing but her dignity wrapped tight around her like a second skin. But when she opened the front door, the wind slammed it shut again, rattling the glass panes. Snow swirled furiously against the porch light, the street barely visible beneath the white haze. "Mom, don't," Lydia's voice called from the hallway. She appeared with a phone in her hand, her brow furrowed. "The forecast says the roads are closing. You'll freeze out there." Clara kept her hand on the doorknob, her lips pressed in a thin line. "I'll be fine. I've walked through worse." Lydia's eyes softened, but only for a moment before her jaw tightened again. "It's too dangerous. You'll have to stay here." The words settled between them like another kind of storm. Clara wanted to refuse, to insist she could manage. But the truth was written in the icy gusts rattling the windows. She wasn't going anywhere tonight. With a sigh, she let go of the door. Fine. The hours stretched long after that. The children were tucked into bed upstairs. James had retreated to the den with a book, and the house fell into a hushed quiet broken only by the occasional groan of the wind outside. Clara sat in the armchair near the fire, the orange glow softening the lines on her face. Her scarf lay across her lap, and she absently ran her fingers over the knitted threads, the same ones she had labored over to create the gift still tucked in that bag. Lydia busied herself with tidying the kitchen, though there wasn't much left to do. She dried dishes that were already dry, rearranged utensils that didn't need rearranging. Anything to keep her hands moving, anything to avoid the heaviness in the living room. Finally, she drifted in, her arms folded across her chest. She sat on the edge of the couch, as far from her mother as the room allowed. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Minutes passed. Clara's throat ached with words unsaid. Lydia's foot tapped impatiently against the carpet, as though she could shake away the discomfort. It was Lydia who broke first, though her tone was brisk. "You can take the couch tonight. I'll grab some blankets." Clara nodded once, her voice low. "Thank you." The silence returned, heavier now. Clara's eyes wandered to the stockings hanging over the mantel, each one embroidered with names. Lydia, James, Emma, Noah. No stocking for her. No space carved out for her in this home. She looked away quickly, blinking back the sting. "Why did you come, Mom?" Lydia's voice cut into the quiet, sharp but uncertain. Clara blinked, startled. "Because it's Christmas. I thought..." She trailed off, her fingers twisting the scarf. "I thought maybe you'd want me here." Lydia leaned back, crossing her arms tighter. "It's just... you don't understand how hard this is for me. Every year I'm the one doing everything. And it feels like you don't notice. Like you never did." Clara's mouth opened, then closed. Her chest tightened. If only you knew, she thought. But the words stuck again, tangled in pride and fear. Instead, she murmured, "I notice. More than you think." Lydia's eyes flickered toward her, searching, but she didn't press. The fire crackled between them, filling the silence they couldn't bridge. The storm outside battered the windows, as if mocking their own tempest within. Neither woman could escape, not until the snow calmed, not until their hearts did. Hours later, when James came to check on them, both were still awake, sitting in the dim glow of the fire. They weren't speaking, but neither had left. Two women, bound by blood and by storm, trapped in a room where silence was louder than words. And somewhere beneath that silence, something began to shift. A question neither dared ask aloud. Was this the night everything would finally break, or finally begin to heal? The fire had burned down to glowing embers, filling the room with a softer, more vulnerable light. Clara sat with her scarf in her lap, her fingers tracing the yarn as if it might anchor her to something steady. Across from her, Lydia leaned into the couch cushion, her arms still folded, though her posture had slackened with exhaustion. The storm outside had eased into a steady fall of snow, but inside, the storm between them still lingered, quieter now but no less dangerous. Clara's voice finally broke the silence. It was low, careful, almost like a confession. You know, when you were little, Christmas used to scare me. Lydia frowned, her tired eyes narrowing. Scare you? Clara nodded, staring into the glowing coals. I never had enough money. Not once. I'd save all year, cutting corners, skipping meals, patching up old shoes so you could have something new. And still, every Christmas, I'd pray you wouldn't notice how small the pile of gifts was. I was terrified you'd feel cheated. The words hung in the air. Lydia blinked, her defenses faltering for just a moment. I don't remember that. You weren't supposed to, Clara whispered. I worked so hard to make sure you didn't. Lydia looked down at her hands, the faint memory of a threadbare teddy bear surfacing in her mind. She had loved that bear, even though she now realized it was secondhand. Her chest tightened, but she shook it off quickly. That doesn't change now, Mom. You still never showed up in the ways I needed. Clara's head turned sharply, her eyes brimming. What do you mean? The question opened something in Lydia. Her voice trembled at first, then grew steadier, fueled by years of swallowed feelings. You were there, yes. You worked. You bought food. But emotionally, you were absent. I had no one to talk to. No one to help me figure out life. You came home tired, distant, and I had to learn to stand on my own. By the time I was a teenager, I felt like the adult in the house. Clara's lips parted as if struck. Tears pricked her eyes. She wanted to argue to defend herself, but deep inside, she knew Lydia wasn't wrong. I thought I was protecting you, Clara whispered. If I cried, if I showed you how scared I was, you'd feel unsafe. So I buried it. I thought strength meant silence. Silence felt like abandonment, Lydia shot back, her voice cracking now. The words shattered something in both of them. Clara's hands trembled, and she clutched the scarf tighter. All these years, she had believed she'd been strong for her daughter. All these years, Lydia had believed her mother simply didn't care enough. Two different stories, born from the same silence. The room seemed to close in around them, heavy with the weight of truth. Clara finally lifted her eyes, meeting Lydia's. I wasn't absent because I didn't love you. I was absent because I loved you too much to let you see me break. Lydia's throat tightened. The image of her mother, small and weary in the glow of the fire, didn't match the cold, careless figure she had painted in her memory. Shook her. But pride fought back. You could have told me. You could have trusted me with the truth. Clara's voice broke, the tears spilling now. I didn't want you to carry my burdens. You were my child. I thought I was sparing you. The embers hissed softly, the only witness to decades of misunderstanding unraveling in whispers. Neither woman spoke for a long while. Lydia leaned back, her own eyes damp, her chest tight with confusion. Anger and pity, love and resentment, they warred inside her, twisting together until she couldn't tell them apart. Clara, meanwhile, felt both lighter and more exposed than she had in years. She had spoken truths she had kept buried, and now there was no taking them back. Finally, Lydia's voice broke the silence. It was softer this time, hesitant. Do you remember when I was 12 and I asked why Dad left? Clara's shoulders stiffened. Yes. You didn't answer. You just told me to focus on school. I thought. Lydia swallowed hard. I thought maybe he left because of me. Because I wasn't enough. The confession struck Clara like a blow. She reached forward instinctively, but Lydia leaned back, her arms wrapping protectively around herself. Oh, Lydia, Clara whispered, her voice raw. He didn't leave because of you. He left because he was weak. Because he couldn't handle responsibility. If I stayed silent, it was to protect you from knowing how little he cared. Lydia's eyes brimmed, her lips trembling. For years she had carried that unspoken wound, the belief that she was somehow the reason her father had walked away. To hear otherwise was both a relief and a fresh ache. The storm outside had quieted, but inside, both women sat in the ruins of their past, the truth finally exposed. Clara leaned back, her tears drying on her cheeks. "I may not have given you everything you wanted, Lydia. But I gave you everything I had." Lydia pressed her lips together, unable to answer. Her chest ached with a collision of old pain and new understanding. She wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. But for the first time, she saw her mother not just as a woman who had failed her, but as a woman who had fought silently and paid a price. The revelation didn't heal the wound, but it opened the door. When parents hide their struggles to protect their children, does it shield them, or create deeper wounds later? What do you think? The fire's embers glowed low, painting the room in shades of orange and shadow. The storm outside had quieted into a gentle hush, snowflakes drifting lazily past the window like feathers. The air inside was still heavy, but something had shifted. The silence no longer felt suffocating. It felt uncertain, tentative, like a wound freshly dressed but not yet healed. Clara sniffled, dabbing her eyes with the corner of her sleeve. Lydia sat across from her, unmoving, her arms still crossed but looser now, less like armor, more like a shield slipping from tired hands. For a long time neither spoke. Then Lydia broke the quiet with an unexpected sound, a small laugh, strained but real. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "the year you burned the turkey?" Clara blinked, startled. Then her lips curved, hesitant but genuine. "Which year?" "I did it twice." The two women looked at each other, and for the first time that night, their eyes softened. Lydia let out another laugh, this one freer. "The second time was worse. The smoke alarm went off, and the neighbors thought the house was on fire. And we ended up eating grilled cheese by the tree," Clara added, a smile tugging at her cheeks. "With tomato soup from a can. And you said it was the best Christmas dinner you'd ever had." Lydia's smile faltered slightly, as if the memory struck something tender. "It was," she admitted. "Because you were laughing. Because it felt easy." The warmth of that shared memory lingered, wrapping around them more gently than any blanket. Clara leaned back in her chair, her voice quieter now. "I miss that version of us. When it was just you and me against the world." Lydia's eyes flickered. "I miss it too." The confession sat between them, fragile but powerful. A moment of silence followed, but it wasn't the heavy silence of earlier. This one felt like space opening, making room for something new. Clara bent down and picked up the small gift bag at her feet. Her hands trembled slightly as she held it out. "I made this for you. I know it's not much. But it's warm. And it's made with love." Lydia hesitated, staring at the bag as though it were something dangerous. Slowly she reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed her mother's, and the touch lingered just a second longer than necessary. She pulled out the blanket, unfolding it carefully. The stitches were uneven, the edges imperfect, but the colors were warm and rich, and the softness spoke of hours of labor. For the first time that evening, Lydia's throat tightened not with anger, but with something closer to sorrow. She ran her fingers along the yarn, imagining her mother bent over it for weeks, hands tired but determined. "It's beautiful," Lydia said quietly. Clara smiled faintly, her eyes glistening. "It's not perfect. But neither am I." The words hit harder than intended. Lydia's chest ached as she folded the blanket into her lap. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, to say I'm sorry, to say I love you. But the words tangled, caught between her pride and her longing. Instead, she shifted closer on the couch. Not right next to her mother, but nearer. Close enough that Clara noticed. The fire cracked softly, filling the silence, and for a while they simply sat together. Not as enemies, not even as mother and daughter locked in battle, but as two women who had weathered storms. Different storms, yet somehow the same. At one point Clara chuckled, a small, tired sound. Do you remember when you begged me for a puppy? You promised you'd feed it, walk it, brush it. Lydia groaned, laughing despite herself. And then you ended up doing everything. Of course I did, Clara said, grinning now. But you loved that dog like he was your brother. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was real. And in that laughter, years of distance seemed to shrink, if only by inches. For the first time that night, Lydia looked at her mother and saw not just the woman who had disappointed her, but the woman who had raised her. The woman who had sacrificed silently. The woman who, despite all her flaws, had never stopped showing up. It was fragile, yes. It was fleeting. But it was something. As the clock chimed midnight, signaling Christmas Day, Clara leaned her head back against the chair and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Lydia." Lydia hesitated, then whispered back, "Merry Christmas, Mom." And though the words were soft, they carried a weight that neither had spoken in years. For that brief, fragile moment, it felt as though healing was possible. But even the most delicate piece can shatter with the smallest strike. The glow of midnight still lingered in the air, the house quiet as though it too had exhaled after the storm. Lydia sat curled beneath the blanket her mother had given her, the soft yarn warming her legs. Clara watched her daughter quietly from the armchair, her heart swelling with cautious hope. For the first time in years she felt that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. But peace is fragile, and sometimes it takes only a whisper to shatter it. The sound of footsteps stirred the silence. James appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. He paused when he saw them, his gaze flicking from Lydia to Clara. "You're both still up?" he asked gently. Lydia smiled faintly. "Just talking." James stepped further in, noticing the blanket. "That's lovely," he said, nodding toward it. Then, without malice, he added, "I hope you thanked your mom properly after the way you froze her out earlier." The words, though innocently spoken, struck like a crack in glass. Lydia stiffened, her smile vanishing. Her cheeks flushed as if James had exposed something raw. "James," she warned, her voice sharp. Clara quickly shook her head. "It's all right. He didn't mean." But Lydia was already pulling the blanket tighter, her tone rising. "You think I don't appreciate it? You think I'm some kind of monster?" James frowned, taken aback. "I didn't say that." Clara rose halfway from her chair, her hands trembling. "Lydia, please." "He didn't mean." But Lydia's eyes were on her mother now, blazing. "And you, sitting there like the sainted victim. You think one blanket erases years of absence, of silence. You think this fixes everything." Clara recoiled, her chest tightening. "I never said it did. You just what?" Lydia snapped, her voice breaking. "You just show up once a year with your handmade gifts and sad eyes, expecting me to melt? Where were you when I needed you? When I cried myself to sleep? When I begged for someone to tell me I mattered?" The words pierced deeper than any blade. Clara staggered back into her chair, tears welling. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I mattered enough to put food on the table," Clara whispered finally. "I mattered enough to keep you clothed, to keep a roof over your head. That's not love, Mom." Lydia's voice cracked. "That's survival. And I needed more than survival." The room pulsed with rawness. James tried to step in, but Clara lifted a trembling hand, silencing him. Her gaze was fixed on her daughter, the years of sacrifice and silence pressing down like a weight too heavy to bear. "You think I didn't want to give you more?" Clara's voice rose now, sharp with pain. "I gave up everything. I gave up myself. And still, it wasn't enough for you." The air split with the accusation. Lydia's breath caught, her hands tightening on the blanket. Her eyes glistened, but her chin lifted defiantly. "Maybe it wasn't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words hung there, poisonous, irreversible. Clara's heart broke in that instant. She felt it physically, a hollow ache tearing through her chest. She sank into the chair, her face crumpling. "Then I don't know what else I could have been," she whispered. The silence that followed was unbearable. James shifted uncomfortably, torn between intervening and retreating. Finally, he touched Lydia's shoulder gently. "Come upstairs. Get some rest." Lydia hesitated, her jaw clenched, but she rose without another word. She folded the blanket quickly and set it on the armrest, as though rejecting the fragile bond it represented. Clara reached out instinctively. "Lydia!" But her daughter was already walking away, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. The sound of a bedroom door closing echoed through the house like a final verdict. Clara sat alone by the dying fire, her hands empty, her heart heavier than ever. The blanket slid from the armrest onto the floor, forgotten. She bent slowly, picking it up, pressing it to her chest as though it could hold together the pieces of her breaking heart. For the first time that night, she wondered if she had lost her daughter forever. And for the first time in years, Lydia lay upstairs, eyes wide in the dark, wondering if she had pushed her mother too far to ever come back. The storm outside had passed. But inside, the storm was just beginning. The house was still, the kind of silence that comes after a storm. Snow blanketed the street outside, glowing silver in the pale moonlight. Inside, two women lay awake in separate rooms, the weight of their words pressing like lead on their chests. Upstairs, Lydia stared at the ceiling, her pillow damp from tears she hadn't intended to shed. She replayed the moment over and over. Her mother's stricken face, the way her voice had cracked on, "Then I don't know what else I could have been." The words had been a dagger, but the worst part was knowing she had plunged it herself. She told herself she had only spoken the truth, that someone had to say it, that maybe her mother needed to hear the cost of her silence. But underneath the defense, a deeper voice gnawed. What if you pushed too hard? What if she never forgives you? She turned over, clutching her blanket, though not the one her mother had made. That one sat folded neatly on the armchair downstairs, abandoned. Lydia's chest ached when she thought of it, of the hours it must have taken to knit each stitch. She had set it aside like it was nothing, like her mother was nothing. Downstairs, Clara sat in the armchair by the cold hearth, her own tears drying on her cheeks. She held the handmade blanket against her chest, rocking slightly as though it were a lifeline. Lydia's words echoed endlessly in her mind. Maybe it wasn't enough. For decades, Clara had carried the belief that she had done her best, that even if she had been flawed, she had at least been enough. But tonight that belief had cracked. Maybe all those years of sacrifice really had fallen short. Maybe love had never been enough to fill the gaps left by exhaustion and silence. Yet as she sat in the dim room, one thought refused to leave her. I can't lose her. Not like this. The hours dragged. Both women wrestled with pride, pain, and longing. Lydia thought of her children upstairs, of the Christmas morning they would wake to in just a few hours. Did she want them to grow up believing love could be so brittle, so easily broken? Or did she want them to see something else, something better? Clara thought of the long years of distance already between them, each holiday strained, each phone call shallow. Did she really want to spend the rest of her life on the outside, staring at her daughter's happiness through a window, never invited fully in? As the clock ticked toward dawn, both reached their breaking point. Lydia swung her legs out of bed, pacing quietly so as not to wake James or the children. Her heart pounded as she stood at the top of the stairs, staring down into the dark living room. She hesitated, pride urging her back, but love, fragile, aching love, pulled her forward. Downstairs, Clara rose from the armchair at the same time, clutching the blanket. She took a few steps toward the staircase, then froze when she saw Lydia descending, her face pale and weary in the dim light. They stopped halfway between mother and daughter, staring at each other across the divide. Neither spoke at first. Finally, Lydia's voice cracked the silence. "Mom, I shouldn't have said that." Clara's grip tightened on the blanket. "But you meant it." Lydia's throat tightened. "I meant the pain, not the words. I was angry. And she faltered, her eyes welling. "I don't want this to be how we end." Clara's tears returned, spilling freely now. "Neither do I." She took a step closer, holding out the blanket with trembling hands. I don't know how to fix the past. I can't undo the mistakes. But I want to be here. I want to try. If you'll let me. Lydia's heart twisted. She saw her mother not as the distant figure of her resentment, but as a tired, flawed woman standing before her, offering what little she had left, herself. The silence stretched, taut and fragile. Lydia's pride warred with her longing, her anger with her love. Her children's laughter upstairs echoed faintly in her memory, a reminder of what love could be if she chose it. Slowly, she reached out and took the blanket, her fingers brushing Clara's once again. This time she didn't pull away. Clara's breath hitched, a sob escaping as her daughter's touch lingered. Neither said the words "I forgive you." Neither said "I'm sorry." But in that quiet moment the choice was made. They would not let this be the end. Wonderful, now we bring everything full circle. Act 9. Resolution, 900 to 1,100 words, must deliver the emotional payoff. Redemption, reunion, and a tender echo of the earlier rejection. Christmas morning becomes not only a holiday celebration but a rebirth of their bond. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, soft and golden against the snow still blanketing the world outside. Upstairs, the sound of children's laughter burst like bells, piercing the silence that had lingered all night. Clara and Lydia sat side by side on the couch, the knitted blanket draped over both their laps. Neither had slept, but neither cared. Their shoulders brushed lightly, a touch so small yet monumental after years of distance. Emma and Noah thundered down the stairs, their eyes shining as they raced toward the Christmas tree. James followed, smiling, but paused when he saw Clara and Lydia together. Something in the air was different. Softer, steadier. He said nothing, only gave Lydia's shoulder a squeeze as he passed. "Presents!" Noah shouted, diving for a box with his name. Emma squealed over a doll, her joy infectious. Paper crinkled, ribbons unraveled, and the room filled with a chaotic symphony of Christmas morning. Clara sat quietly, her heart aching with both joy and hesitation. For years she had watched these moments from the edges, afraid to intrude. This morning she felt the familiar tug to retreat again, until Lydia turned to her with a small smile. "Mom," she said softly, "why don't you hand out the gifts this year?" Clara froze. Her throat tightened. "Are you sure?" Lydia nodded, her voice steady but warm. "Yes. I want the kids to know you're part of this." The words sank deep, sweeter than any gift wrapped beneath the tree. Slowly, with trembling hands, Clara leaned forward and picked up a box, reading the tag aloud. "This one's for Emma." Emma squealed, running to grab it from her grandmother's hands. "Thanks, Grandma," she chirped before darting back to tear into the paper. Clara blinked hard, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. The word, Grandma, wrapped around her like the blanket in her lap, soft and undeniable. One by one, she passed out the presents, her voice growing steadier each time. The children laughed and hugged their gifts. James smiled quietly, sipping his coffee. And Lydia? Lydia watched her mother with a look that was no longer guarded, but open. When the pile beneath the tree had dwindled, Clara hesitated. One last bag remained, the small, crumpled one she had brought with her the night before. She lifted it slowly, her heart pounding. I brought this for you, Lydia," she said, her voice wavering. The room hushed, the children distracted for a moment by the shift in tone. Lydia reached out and took the bag, pulling out the hand-knit blanket once more. She unfolded it, her fingers brushing the uneven stitches, her eyes softening. She looked up at her mother, her voice catching. "Thank you, Mom." This time the words were not polite, not strained. They were real. Clara swallowed the lump in her throat. "I know it can't erase the past. But it's a piece of me for you." Lydia's eyes glistened. Without hesitation, she draped the blanket across her shoulders and leaned over, pressing her forehead against her mother's. The children, oblivious, went back to their toys, but James caught the moment, his eyes misting. "Merry Christmas, Mom," Lydia whispered. Clara closed her eyes, the words flooding her with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "Merry Christmas, my love." The room filled again with laughter and chatter, but for Clara, time seemed to stand still. She had walked into this house feeling like an outsider, rejected and humiliated. Now, wrapped in the laughter of her grandchildren and the fragile but real embrace of her daughter, she felt something she had long believed lost. She belonged. Later, as the morning settled into calm and the children played quietly with their new toys, Lydia reached for her mother's hand. Their fingers intertwined, tentative at first, then firm. "I don't know if I can forget everything overnight," Lydia admitted. "But I want to move forward. I want my kids to know their grandmother. I want us." Clara's tears fell freely, but they were different now. Not of sorrow but of relief. "That's all I've ever wanted." The crack between them wasn't gone, but it was no longer a canyon. It was a bridge, fragile yet standing. And with every step forward they would strengthen it. Outside, the snow glistened under the rising sun, the world washed clean. Inside, a family began again.
Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this video, and I'm confident you enjoyed it. We've got many more exciting and heartwarming stories waiting for you. Just click on the image on your screen to watch the next one.